you know more about this than I do, except how do you decide that 9 Mile Hole is the home of Brown? There's no sign there. I looked. It says home of Brown.
There is now. No, I'm kidding. So when Jimmy McCracken had the lawsuit against the Fenn estate and the emails between Jack and Forrest were released to the public for that trial, I think that's when Jack actually sends an email to Forrest about Kim Eagle's article about the great fishing at 9 Mile Hole, because it gives away too many clues. And one of those was the fact that that was the best brown trout fishing hole, like in America or Wyoming or wherever. And I mean, people can actually go find this if they want to. It's public now. And Jack basically said to Forrest, please do not publish any more scrapbooks or anything more about the Eagles and 9 Mile Hole. So I guess Jack just used that fishing hole as his home of Brown. So, yeah, and why not? I think that's pretty much dead on.
I do remember after the chest was found, there was correspondence for a while between Forrest and whoever the finder was, and the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park, the superintendent at any rate, did not want the location disclosed. She was fairly adamant about that. Forrest shared some of these emails with me. And
is that Sarah Davis at the time?
I can't remember.
I mean, she was head of the park rangers in Yellowstone. I don't know. I don't think she was actually the superintendent.
I can't remember, but I think it was this conversation that I'm talking about was between him and the superintendent. I know that later on the chief ranger did get involved, but I think initially it went higher. I think it got turned over to you know, everything rolls downhill, and I think eventually got shifted to the chief ranger, who would have been the most logical person to be concerned about things like traffic in that area. I mean, that area is relatively pristine in the park. Which is why Forrest loved it so much. And you know, there was no trail back there. There was no bridge to that area across the Madison. And so I did not know where the area was, but I knew that that they were talking about the area where the chest was found, and the superintendent or the chief ranger, whoever it was very intent on making sure that the area was not disclosed, because they did not want the crazy searchers back there. They did not want the area to be turned into some kind of barren spot where thousands of people every week went, you know, in a trail back there.
Yeah, you know, I think they so blew it all out of proportion. The fact that you actually had to wait across the Madison limits the access a little bit. I mean, people like Justin, oh my God, Justin must be like 7 feet tall. I've seen him walk, I've seen him wade across the Madison almost into the hole of Brown, the home of Brown, into the fishing hole. But he's so tall, it doesn't matter. Then you take someone that's my height, and when I cross, I do go below the home of Brown to cross, where it's the most shallow. There's like these underwater bridges, sort of. I actually had a fisherman, an old guy there once when I was playing in the river. And he said, why are you crossing there? It's so much shallower down here. And it's like, holy cow, he was right, it was. And eventually we found out that's where Jack crossed, because that's where the oil tree is, which you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's okay. So anyway, okay, one other thing before I forget. Do you remember when you were first sharing all your information with me, and we were discussing the legalities of Forrest hiding the chest in a national park, and you said to me, there is no place safer than a national park. Do you remember that conversation?
Absolutely.
And why? Explain to the viewers why that is. And I totally agree.
Well, Forrest could have chosen any place, but remember, in the beginning, at any rate, he was thinking about leaving it somewhere, and he always toyed with the idea of it wouldn't be found for a while. And if it wasn't going to be found for a while, he had to find a place where it would be safe for a while. Now, as we all know, wild places in this country are disappearing at a rapid rate. They're being turned into suburban areas. They're being turned into cabins. Even Forest Service land is the trees are mowed down. They put up trails and roads, and so Forest wanted to put it someplace where none of that would happen. There's no place safer than a national park. I mean, to hide something like that, because nobody's going to be putting in more roads. Nobody's, well, at least not back in that area. They're not going to be tearing it up to put in a lodge. Nobody's going to be selling it off to be put in some tract housing somewhere. And West Yellowstone can't expand in that area, in that direction. So it was a safe area, even if Forest planned on it being there for, you know, for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. That place, you know, is probably going to look pretty much exactly the same unless a forest fire comes through there and burns it down, which happened in much of the park. Not that particular area, but it did happen in much of the park. And Forest Chest probably would have survived intact if there had been a fire there.
Yeah, I think one time he talked about the elements that could harm it. And of course, I mean, he even brought up wind, which it didn't harm the chest, but it blew the damn tree over that had the blaze on it, which is probably why people didn't find it sooner.
And maybe that's what he meant.
Yeah, could be. It didn't affect the chest, but it affected the solutions.
The ability to find it.
Yeah, the ability to find it for sure. Okay, now I really want to switch topics here. Yesterday you sent me an interview, an audio interview that was labeled 2020. Was that actually, and Forrest in it says he's 89 years old during this interview. Was that actually from 2020? Do you recall? And then I'm gonna mention a couple things he said in it. So it was labeled, so you know how you sent me the links.
The radio interview.
The very first one, yeah, and it was the top one, and it's actually labeled 2020.
Okay, well, to best of my knowledge, the way I had them labeled is exactly when they were recorded.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's what I thought. So that might be the last interview he actually ever did in 2020, and I'm assuming it was before the chest was found, because during that interview there's no indication that it was after June 5th or 6th. I'm sure it was before. So okay. So in that interview,
was that with Richard Eads?
No, it was before. I have all the Richard Eads ones in my own list, but the one at the top, the link at the top, I never had heard before. That's why I was curious about it and the timing.
Do you remember where it was from? KPLU?
Mm-mm. It was not that. It said something like BH, like BH 2020.
Okay.
Something like that, or BHFF 2020, something like that. So okay, so. A couple things in there that I wanted to bring up that might be slightly different. He talked a lot about starting his gallery and how when he left the military, moved to Santa Fe, you know, he wanted to have a business where he was spending an hour with one customer and making $40,000. I want to talk about his gallery just a little bit. So everyone knows Forrest really promoted Eric Sloane. Did Forrest ever talk to you about Elmer DeHory and those paintings, and were they as lucrative for him as what Sloane's were? I love the DeHory stories. I read the book Fake, and now I wish I owned a fake DeHory painting.
Oh, you do?
I wish I had one. I don't have one. I have an Eric Sloane painting, but I do not have a DeHory painting.
Oh,
so did Forrest ever talk to you much about DeHory?
Oh, we talked about it because it was, you know, just in terms of him telling that story several times. During interviews, and of course he wrote about it, and it was a story he particularly relished because he did really well on it against all odds, and it apparently was his idea, and he had to sell Connolly on the idea, and Connolly was very doubtful even as they were coming back after they had purchased the paintings, and Forrest said, well, okay, well, you know, I don't know how we're going to sell them or something like that. And Connolly said, well, you should have thought of that before we bought them. I mean, you know, the odds were against him ever being able to do anything. But Forrest was you know, I hesitate to use the word shuckster, but, you know, Forrest was very good at selling things. Very, very good at selling things. And he had confidence in his ability to sell these in such a way that he wasn't going to try and hoodwink anybody. He could make DeHory the artist that he really was and make everybody want a DeHory, you know? He wasn't going to try and pass them off as something else. They were DeHorys. And aren't you lucky for being in the presence of one? And do you realize what a famous person DeHory is? That was the trick that Forrest, you know, from him being a scoundrel and stuff that nobody wanted to collect to a guy that everybody wanted to collect because of the stories Forrest told.
Yeah, I think DeHory actually is, if you're going to talk worldwide art world, he's way, way more famous than probably Eric Sloane ever was or will be. But yeah, like I said, I sure wish I could own one, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then, okay, so in that same interview, Forrest talks about Vietnam and when he was the fighter pilot. And he actually says, quote, "I did some things I wish I had not done." I'm pretty sure that you have maybe told me in the past that you and Forrest, or that Forrest used to talk to you about Vietnam. And in your opinion, do you think that the things that he did bothered him even more as he got older? And if you don't want to talk about this, that's okay too. I don't want you to share anything that bothers you that you're telling Forrest stories that he does not want to be told.
I think the answer to your question is yes. I do think it bothered him more as he got older, as it would anyone.
Sure.
As would war anyone, as would killing people bother anyone more the older they get, or most people at any rate. I mean, if you don't have predilections, you know, for killing, you're trained to not think about this stuff. You're trained to just pull the trigger and get them before they get you. And that's what you do. And then you get home and maybe you don't think about it for a while, or maybe you do. Maybe you can't stop thinking about it. That, you know, the Ten Commandments, if you're a godly person, it says thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill except in combat. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill except when you have a good reason. It just says thou shalt not kill. And, you know, all of a sudden you were given a license to kill by your country. And you start thinking about that, and the two of them don't really,
right.
They don't gel together.
Right.
And you wonder which one is, you know, you think about stuff like that. And some people can absolutely not think about it. Good for them. Good for them. They don't have to be burdened with that question in their mind. They can put it off forever and ever. And other people come home and they start thinking about it. And they can't stop thinking about it. And they wonder anymore if they're a good person. Keeps them awake at night. PTSD, all kinds of problems. They can't get along with people, you know. Yeah, I think Forrest, the older you get, the more you think about that. And I think Forrest was certainly one of those people. You know, Forrest was busy when he got home. He had a family he had to take care of, and a lot of times that helps. You know, if you keep busy, and he did keep busy, and that was probably one of the reasons he kept busy, was so he didn't have to think about that stuff. But sure, the older you get, the less active you are, the more time you have to think, and I think Forrest was at that. You know, he reached that point long ago, and he started thinking more and more and regretted some of what he did. Yeah.
Right. And this is one topic he actually never talked to me about. And the other thing that he never talked to me about was any time he ever got sick, which is, I have no idea why my relationship with him was different than other searchers that he was close to. What Forrest shared with me was different than what he told others. So I was just wondering.
Because he was busy giving you clues to where the chest was.
Drawing me maps and everything. Although, you know, regarding the conversations with Forrest, though, once I started searching Yellowstone and spent a lot of time in West Yellowstone or even Cody, and I actually got to know the areas really, really well, it became so much fun talking to him about whether it was my solutions. I don't know how he could stand to hear so many people's solutions all day long for 10 years. But the good thing was, because I also wanted to walk in Forrest's footsteps, I hiked Slough Creek. I went back to Grebe Lake, not doing searches, just to walk in his footsteps. So then I could come home and I could have these really awesome discussions about Yellowstone and these places, which had nothing to do with the poem or finding the chest. Did you also?
Oh, I think it did. And so, yeah, I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah,
I think it did have something to do with finding the chest. I think you and I both felt that our closeness, our association with Forrest was an advantage in that it let us walk in his shoes, in that we knew something about Forrest. We could sense him, we could feel him, and perhaps, I mean, the poem was such an enigma that we needed all the help we could get. And somehow, if you could get in Forrest's head, you might be able to figure out what the hell that poem was all about. And that's where I was coming from, was trying to understand Forrest. And I always thought that understanding his sense of humor was a key. I thought that poem definitely had some humor in it. And I also thought that there were considerations that Forrest had. There were, I thought his history was really important. The places he loved as a kid, the place he grew up, the way his father raised him, the way his grandfather treated him, the way Skippy treated him, the way he treated Skippy. I thought all of those things, knowing that, would help me step into Forrest's shoes and walk to the treasure. You know, I thought it would. It didn't, but I thought it would, you know. Maybe it was only because I only superficially got to know Forrest, and I never really got to know him better, because I never really understood the poem. I never really felt I understood the poem. I always felt, and I always second-guessed myself, even if I had a good idea, like Madison Junction. I don't know, you know, maybe this isn't right. I never looked in 9 Mile Hole because I felt it was too close. It was to Madison Junction. It wasn't too far to walk. I felt I had to go further down that canyon.
Yeah, I think Forrest said that basically it's like 4 miles, I think, or I think it's like 4.2 miles between Madison Junction and 9 Mile Hole, the pull off. And so I think Forrest, I don't know if he wrote this as from the eyes of an 80-year-old man, but if he did look at it through the eyes of an 80-year-old man when he hit it, 79 or 80, then that's too far for him to walk at that age. So, I mean, it's you know, it is vague. Well, maybe someday everyone can hear Forrest say in his own words what different things meant. But for right now, you know, we just basically have what Jack has said in the Q&As and what I've been blabbing on the blogs for 2 years. So anyway,
yeah, you know, and Forrest did talk to me a little bit about the distance. You know, how far is too far to walk. I think I've said this before, but Forrest, we talked a little bit about that for whatever reason. I don't know why it came up. He must have brought it up. I'm sure I didn't ask him, but he said, so, you know, something like, well, how far is too far to walk? And who are we talking about? Are we talking about for me? Are we talking about for you? Are we talking about for a 20-year-old? Are we talking about for an ant? And he said, you know, to an ant, a puddle can be an ocean.
Right.
And you know, I always thought that he was talking about him, but I always thought that 4 miles was something he could walk too. It never occurred to me that he couldn't walk to 9 Mile Hole.
Yeah, I mean, there again, you know, I don't have much more comment on this. We'll just, yeah, that sounds good. But I think it was through his eyes that he thought that when
That's why to this day I don't believe it was 9 Mile Hole.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
The interview almost ended right there, folks. But no, Dale came around. So Dale knows what to tell me to keep this interview going. So, okay, so I want to talk about before Forrest passed away. I was lucky enough, he invited, I was still living.
Did you write this?
Yes.
You've got good handwriting.
Thank you. I was still, it doesn't matter where I was living. Forrest invited me to his home August 28th, 2020, and I was there. It was during COVID. It was set up so he had 2 lawn chairs set up about like 6 feet apart, whatever the distance was. We both had a mask on when I arrived, and then when we got to our chairs, we could take the masks off. And he and I had just one of the most awesome 2-hour visits I ever had with him. Do you want to talk, or is it too hard to talk about the last time you had any kind of contact with him, whether it was emails, whatever? So the chest was, Forrest announced the chest was found June 6th, I believe, and then eventually he passed away on September 7th. So did you have a lot of contact with him in those months in between?
Blank.
Uh-oh.
Honestly, I can't remember.
If you say you don't recall, that means you really do remember, but you're not going to say.
It's not that. Honestly, anything about me and memory is always a giant, question mark. I'm sure I've already repeated things that I've said before in a different way. I can't. I'm like no different than Forrest. If I tell a story, I'm going to tell it different each time. I have the memory of a metal sieve. So, and I honestly, you said something there that made me think. What was the last conversation I had with Forrest, or what were the last exchange of emails? I don't remember.
Do you want me to tell you your conversations with Forrest? My God. I'll tell you what, between Chrissy and me, I swear we can quote everybody in the chase.
I'm sure that's true.
Especially during that time period.
Yeah, well, help me out here.
I believe that you told me that, I assume that it was in the email, I don't recall, that Forrest had told you that he would... I don't remember. I'm paraphrasing the ending. That he would tell you the ending or whatever, eventually someday, blah blah blah. I don't remember exactly. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. So that was right after the chest was found and the pictures were released. And again, I wasn't trying to hound Forrest. I figured he was pretty busy fending off thousands of searchers who were asking him questions. But first of all, he asked me if I was mad at him. And I said, no, of course not. I'm not mad at him. This was in an email. He asked me if I was mad at him. And I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I wasn't sure. I had an idea what that meant. But I didn't know then, and to this day I don't know for sure, but I speculated to myself that he was referring to the fact that earlier he had talked about ending the chase. And it looked like to me that he had ended it, that he had found someone to give enough information to that they could go get the chest and end the chase. And he was asking me, and because I had told him no, I didn't think that was a good idea to end the chase, and so I was thinking now he was asking me if I was mad at him for ending the chase. And then the other thing that when I replied to him, I said, well, will I ever know exactly what went on or how this all came out? And he said, I will tell you, but I can't do it right now. Something to that effect. Those weren't his exact words. I can't recall his exact words. But it was something short like that. Yeah, he said, yeah, you will find out, but now's not the right time.
Do you have any idea if he was referring to the? I believe there was a lawsuit ongoing right then. So do you think that it was because of the lawsuit that he felt that he was not legally probably a good idea to talk about it then, or just you don't know why he meant that time?
I just assumed that it was too soon. He had lots of things yet that he needed to tie up, that there were discussions to be had with Jack or whoever it was that found the chest, and that there were just, he couldn't give me all the information yet because it wasn't all settled, that he needed time to put it all in order, maybe write it down, and just that minute wasn't right, but it would come eventually. I mean, he shared a lot of stuff with me, so I can't imagine he really didn't intend to share how that would have all unfolded with me. I mean, he shared his notes, his emails from the Yellowstone superintendent and the Yellowstone chief ranger with me. So there were certainly things that there were things that he wanted me to know, and I think he trusted me. I don't think it was a matter of he felt I'd go blabbing stuff around that just because I had information. I don't think he thought of me that way. I mean,
he knew better than to tell me, because I would have a conversation with Cynthia, video out there on YouTube within the next 24 hours. So,
well, I kept things, unless Forrest specifically told me not to do things, I mean, and we would have conversations all the time. When he wrote his scrapbooks, he would ask me to edit them, he would say, read this through, and I would give him feedback. I'd say, well, that sentence doesn't make any sense. Or I would rewrite a couple of sentences for him. Like anybody, you just get too close to what you write. You don't see the mistakes. You can't even see the typos, and that's all it was. I was just an editor for him on the scrapbooks. I didn't change the tone of them, but I did certainly help him edit them and rewrite some of them. And I think, and in that way, I think he trusted me. He trusted me to make good, sound decisions, and I never put out anything that I didn't have permission for, including the PDF, the book, whatever it was called. I had his permission to do that, and I think that the fact that I had those photographs is really, really good evidence that I did have his permission to do that. Why else would he want me to take pictures of them if he didn't want me to release it, if he didn't want me to have them, if he didn't want me to share them?
Yeah, now, because you just talked about Forrest sharing his notes with you about him conversing or in contact with the superintendent and the chief ranger of Yellowstone, do you remember the time frame of that?
It was right. No, I don't. I was about to say it was right after the chest was declared found by Forrest, but it may have. No, it was after, because I had no right. It was after that.
Yeah. So I believe people have done FOIAs with the Yellowstone National Park, and there's actually a date, and it can be confirmed with Carl as well, that I believe that Forrest and his lawyer and Jack and his lawyer talked to Yellowstone. I mean, they had to settle this before Jack could officially
disclose.
Yeah,
they found it.
They had to tell Yellowstone they found it in the park before they could move forward and before Jack could ever consider selling it.
And why? And why?
I think a lot of it had to do with Jack being able to sell it down the road. They had to get this complication taken care of. And
why? And
unless you know.
No, I don't. I was just trying to make sure everybody understood. There's a rule. Yes. There's a law that says if you find things in a national park, they aren't yours. You can't go around picking things up and throw them in your car and take them home. Whether or not that applied to the chest, was questionable. But nonetheless, you can't pick up certain things in a national park, throw them in your car, and drive out with them. You're not allowed to do it. It's against the law. There's a penalty for it. It could be years in prison. So after the chest was found, after Jack or whoever removed it from the park, they had to solve this problem. You know, they had to come to some agreement, and the agreement would have been that, apparently, that Jack would not disclose where he found the chest, and neither would Forrest. And so that was part of the rule, and that's why to this day we don't know exactly where the chest was found. We speculate. Some of us feel we know exactly where. Some others don't. But sure. It was never disclosed by Jack, and it was never disclosed by Forrest, and those are the reasons why.
Yes, and after Rudy Green found the stick that Jack said he tossed that was in the chest, Jack didn't toss it. He moved it about a foot or two away from where he was probably had knelt down, and Rudy found that. And we actually had the GPS locations.
I'm going to have...
Okay.
First of all, when I went back to 9 Mile Hole after everything was found, I decided to carve a stick just like the one that was in the chest. And no, I'm kidding. I didn't do that.
I'm going to hit you over the head with this microphone. So I'll tell you what, you would have had to do that damn... Oh no, it took us over a year to get it. Jack found it. Jack retrieved it. Yeah, Jack retrieved the chest in supposedly June 5th or 6th, June 6th, 2020. And then Rudy found the stick. Oh my God, the years were just so complicated. I think he found it March or early May 2022, because I was there riding my bicycle with a bison in April, and I actually crossed 9 Mile Hole to try to find the nook log still, and there was still a little bit too much snow. But eventually Rudy did find it. So anyway, Rudy was so excited. Every night he was ever there looking, he'd call me at night, tell me what his day encompassed. And then the day that he found it was right before he was flying back to Tennessee that night, and blah, blah, blah. But he gave me the GPS. He wouldn't write this down because he was afraid of the other statute that has to do with you. If you reveal where the chest was found and then there's damage, you're liable, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I had balls the size of basketballs, and I took those GPS coordinates and a map of the, like a Google Earth map of all the spots that had everything labeled, where the precise spot where Rudy found the stick with the GPS, sent it to Carl. I actually sent it, I think it was to Tom, Nashko, Carl, Jack, and then I said, please tell Sarah Davis we found the spot, blah, blah, blah. Can Jack please confirm? And this supposedly did go to Yellowstone, and supposedly their take on this is, we don't give a shit what you searchers think. It's that Jack nor Forrest can say. They're the two people that cannot say that was the spot. They didn't care. Yeah, exactly. And so that's
everything else is just speculation, as we used to say on the blog.
Yeah, right. Unless that video comes out someday. So, but it's not out yet. So we just have to wait. Yeah, but he's dead now. So, that was my other question. So because Forrest,
yes, I do believe Forrest died.
Yeah. So do you? So because the arrangement was between Forrest and Yellowstone, now that he has passed, can the estate put it out? Because they're not for it.
I don't know. I'm not an attorney, and I have no idea what was worked out.
Yeah. What's your humble opinion?
In my humble opinion, the family wouldn't want to.
Okay. That's fair. And I guess, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Don't know.